Alright, in today's video we're going to do an algebra topic. This is integer arithmetic. So this will be in the back of your test 1 notes, and it is just a single page. So these are just some basic integer rules. Even though we get a calculator in this class, having these rules and kind of understanding them is very helpful. So we're going to talk first about, sorry, you can hear my cat back there. We're going to talk about two numbers that have the same sign. Okay, so if we're adding and the numbers have the same sign, it's very, very easy, right? We just add the numbers together. So the first example, that's straight from elementary school. You just add 7 plus 8 and you get 15. I do that example first just to show you that it's the same idea if you're adding two negative numbers together. So we've got -6 plus -16. The signs are the same, so we still add the numbers, and then we keep the signs. So to do integers, sometimes I think about either money, like you owe somebody $6, and then you owe them another $16, so altogether you owe them $22. Another way to think about it is football. If you lose 6 yards in one play, and then in the next play you lose another 16 yards, altogether you've lost 22 yards, so that's why you have the negative. Now when the signs are different, the instructions are maybe a little more confusing than they have to be. It says find the absolute value of both numbers. That's just a fancy way of saying ignore the signs. We're going to subtract the smaller number from the larger number. Keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. So for this first example, I have a -12 and a +8. So what I'm doing is I'm ignoring the signs for just a minute, and I'm looking at 12 and 8. So if I take the difference between 12 and 8, I get 4. Now 12 is bigger than 8, so I'm going to keep the sign for the 12. Now it is true that -12 is not bigger than 8, but remember we're comparing their absolute values, so we're comparing the numbers themselves without the signs. So since 12 is bigger than 8, we're going to keep its sign, we get -4. Again, you can think football. If you lose 12 yards on one play, but then you gain 8 of those back on the next play, altogether you're still down 4 yards. All right, same thing for number 4. We have a negative and a positive. So I look at the 16 and the 4, and if the signs are different, I know I subtract those, so that gives me 12. 16 is bigger than 4, so since 16 is positive, I keep its sign. Again, if we're thinking football, we lose 4 yards on the first play, but we gain 16 yards on the second play, so altogether we're up 12 yards. All right, our last example, we have different signs, so again, we're going to subtract. The difference between 11 and 8 is 3. Now 11 is bigger than 8, so we're going to keep its sign, so my answer is going to be -3. All right, now subtracting is a little bit more complicated. Generally what we do is we change it to an addition problem. So we have a little helpful hint right here. If I have A minus B, that's the same as A plus the opposite of B. So if I have -4 minus 13, the 13 is actually positive. So this one's a negative and this one's a minus. So I can rewrite that as -4 plus the opposite of 13, which is -13. Another way to think of it is I just look at what's in front of both numbers, and since it's the same, I go back up to this rule. I add and I keep the sign. So that's going to give me -17. So 2 minus 9, I can think of that as 2 plus -9. Or I can just look at what's in front of the number. Here's a plus, so I don't really see it, but I know it's there. A plus and a minus, so those are different. Anytime the signs are different, we subtract. The difference between 9 and 2 is 7. 9's bigger, so I keep the sign. All right, so here's the ones that you really do have to rewrite. And that's anytime you see a minus, a negative. So we're going to go back up to this rule. So I'm going to keep the 3 minus 8, But instead of minusing a negative 1, that would be the same as adding the opposite, which would be adding a positive 1. So you can see when you have these two negatives together, they're always going to form a positive. All right, so from here, I can go left to right. I have to be really careful here. So I want to do my order of operations. So 3 minus 8, signs are different, so I subtract. 8's bigger, so I keep the sign. I get negative 5 plus 1. Again, the signs are different. Negative 5 plus 1, I subtract. I keep the sign of the bigger number, and that's negative 4. I want to list here, I want to show you a common mistake. So a lot of people will not follow their order of operations, and they'll look at 8 plus 1, and they'll say, well, that's 9. So that's actually not true because they're ignoring this sign. So negative 8 plus 1 is not 9. Negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. So if you do it this way, you'll end up with 3 minus 9 and you'll make a mistake. So this is wrong. If you're going to start with the back numbers, you do have to look at the negative. So negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7. I bring the 3 down. 3 minus 7, and that also gives me negative 4. So if you're going to start with the back numbers, you do have to take that sign in front of the number. The easiest way to do it is left to right. So let's look at one where we have a whole bunch of numbers. So where I want to do my rewrite is anywhere I see minus a negative. I see one there and I see one there. I have got to do a rewrite of that first before I do anything else. So that's going to become 11 plus 2 minus 6 plus 10 minus 8 minus 3 plus 9. Now instead of going left to right, that would take me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find everything that's positive. So I'm going to underline 11's positive, 2's positive, 10's positive, 9's positive. I'm going to write those down first. 11 plus 2 plus 10 plus 9. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to find all the ones that have a minus or a negative in front of them. So there's a minus 6, a minus 8, and a minus 3. And I'm going to write those in the back. So you're allowed to reorder, you just have to keep the signs that go in front of the numbers. So now notice I have a bunch of positives and I have a bunch of negatives. So the positives are easy. I add them all up and I keep the sign. So if I add all those together, that should be 20, 30, 32. So let me come over here for that. So positive 32. If I add all these together, they're all negative. So remember, if the signs are the same, I'm going to add and keep the sign. So if I add 6, 8, and 3, let's see, that's 14 plus 3, that's 17, but I'm going to keep the minus sign. So I end up with 32 minus 17, and then that's a nice easy subtraction. I get 15. All right, so those are your rules for adding and subtracting. Multiplying and dividing rules are quite different, but they're actually easier. So your rules for multiplying and dividing, these are only for 2 numbers at a time. If you have the same sign, the product, meaning you're multiplying, or the quotient, meaning you're dividing, will be positive. So look at these first 2 examples. We have a negative times a negative, so that's going to give us a positive product, so positive 48. Same for division, negative 24 divided by negative 3, that's going to give me a positive 8. Okay, so if the signs are the same, the product or quotient comes out to be positive. Here's another way to write the quotient. This is just a division sign, so negative 36 divided by 3. Notice here the signs are different. So when the signs are different, our answer is negative. When the signs are the same, our answer is positive. So we're taking the quotient of a negative and a positive, so our answer will be negative 12. All right, down here we're multiplying 3 numbers together, so let's start with the first 2. Signs are different, so the product is going to be negative. So negative 36. Now we're going to multiply that to negative 3. So you can use your calculator or you can work that out real quick. Negative times a negative is going to be a positive 108. All right, so when you're multiplying, the order of operations, it's all one set of operations. So what I'm going to do to save time is I'm going to do 2 at a time. I'm going to multiply these in pairs. So here we have a negative times a positive, so that'll be a negative 10. A negative times a positive, that'll be a negative 3. And then a positive times a negative, that'll be a negative 8. I'm keeping parentheses to indicate that I'm multiplying. Now once we get to here, I pick 2 of these, I multiply them together. That would be positive 30 times negative 8. A positive times a negative is a negative, and that gives me negative 240. A little bit of a shortcut, if you're doing all multiplication or division with no addition or subtraction, one thing you can do is you can count your negatives. If you have an even number of negatives, the product will be positive. So that's because any 2, if we multiply them, we get a positive. So if it's even, it means everything pairs up, so I get a whole bunch of positives. Now if you count and you have an odd number of negatives, and again this is only for multiplication and division, not for addition and subtraction. If it's an odd number of negatives, then the product is negative. So we can see it on this example. We had 1, 2, 3. We had 3 negatives. That's an odd, so we expected our answer to be negative.